Good morning, everybody. If I can have your attention, please, we'll get underway with the formalities. First off, I'd like to welcome Principal Dr. Julie Wilson Reynolds and her leadership team of the school, both senior and middle school. This is the first time we've had the joint father-daughter breakfast, so for some dads, I'm sure it's a blessing because you have to only do it once, and we appreciate you showing up. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce the girls, Ms. Josephine Lake, to do the Welcome to Country.
I would like to take this opportunity to present the acknowledgement of country. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and their care of it for thousands of years. Open to the spirit who has ever been present here, we resolve to appreciate its beauty, to be wise stewards of its resources, and to honour the connection the traditional custodians, the Kumaberi from the Yugambeh Nation, have with this land. Thank you.
Thank you, Josephine. I'd like to introduce Elsa to do grace.
Let us give thanks. In a world where so many are hungry, may we eat this food with humble hearts. In a world where so many are lonely, may we give thanks for our family and friends. In a world where so many are lost, may we find peace and acceptance. We thank you, Lord, for those who have worked to bring us together this morning, and especially today for the fathers and grandfathers who love us. Amen.
The Fathers Club extends an invitation to the middle and senior school students, their fathers and grandfathers, to a special breakfast featuring guest speaker Rebecca Mailli. Rebecca is a clinical psychologist specialising in the assessment and treatment of children, adolescents, adults and families. Rebecca is the founder of Mind Time Psychology. So when she comes up here, please join us in making her feel welcome. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone. It is fabulous to see so many here. I don't know if you felt like me, but it's very early to be here at 6:30. Did you feel that? Can I say well done? Well done, dads, granddads, and friends of family. Can I congratulate you on not only being so connected and involved with your daughter, but that you're willing to get up at 5:30 in the morning to be here at 6:30. So well done. Girls, I hope you will appreciate your dads and granddads and thank them for that. I am so looking forward to hearing from Rebecca. I have been picking her brains about things that I could learn from her about resilience in young people. But I was also picking her brains about resilience in those of us who are a little older. Dads and granddads, I don't know if you've thought about the resilience you need to be doing the role that you're doing, but I hope today's talk will help you with that. I'm going to be a little bit cheeky and advertise another breakfast because I figure I'm preaching to the converted. Here I have a whole group of people who are willing to come and be here. And Rebecca has told me that time spent with your daughter is one of the best investments you can make. So here's another opportunity where you could spend some time with your daughter. And it's on the 18th of March. And it's another breakfast here on Monday the 18th of March, which is only a few weeks away. We have Gemma Sisia from the School of St Jude's in Tanzania. Now, some of you might be aware that 23 of our girls visited Tanzania over the Christmas break. And they visited the school, and the principal is coming here to share something of her amazing story. She's an Aussie girl from Armidale who went to Tanzania, fell in love with it, saw the poverty, saw the need, and has set up a school. And it is a most amazing school. And as a very well-established school here on the Gold Coast, we would like to support Gemma's work in Tanzania. She's about to start a project where she will be focusing on girls' education and setting up a whole wing of her school to support the education of girls, which is often left as a secondary consideration in a country where poverty is common. So we are looking forward to having Gemma here. I know the girls who went to Tanzania are very excited about it. You are all very welcome, and half the proceeds of the money spent on the breakfast will go directly to the school. So I encourage you to join us for that. But it is my great pleasure now to invite Rebecca to come and speak, and please welcome Rebecca.
Good morning, everybody. Can everyone up the back hear okay? Excellent. So we're going to have a slide presentation up. Feel free if you want to throughout, if there's things that come up that you want to make notes of, to take photos of the screen and things like that if you would like to. But it's lovely to be here. I was just saying down the front, it's bringing back a lot of memories of for myself when I was at school up in Brisbane, going to father-daughter dinners or breakfasts that they had. So it's lovely to see so many fathers and grandfathers here with their daughters this morning. So I'm a clinical psychologist. I work with a lot of young people up through to adults. I'm based in Churn Park in terms of where I have a clinic. And we're a team that works a lot with young people and children as well as with families to try and help to establish really healthy relationships that are there. I enjoy it so much that I, after 7 years of study, have continued on to a PhD in the area. So looking at building parent-child relationships, particularly in the middle age group period, but also hoping to extend that up to teenage years as well. So when it gets written, you can read it, but that might be a few years off just yet. So today we're looking at building emotional management or resilience in young people that's there. But in order to be able to work on developing really good resilience, the first thing we need to look at doing is making sure we have a really good understanding of actually recognising those uncomfortable emotions when they start to increase at different times. So what we're going to do is go through a bit of an overview of different types of emotions that we do experience, some of our normal feelings that we do have, a little bit about getting to know your brain and how it works in that respect, and then how we can build a toolkit for better managing those different emotions. So I'm using the language of teenagers up there in terms of showing the faces, but if we look back at research, what it had indicated initially was that it identified that there's generally universally 6 emotions that are recognised worldwide. And that's from people looking at pictures of different types of feelings. And they had come up with it being happiness, sadness, anger, fear, surprise and disgust. More recent research has actually found that some of those are misinterpreted when they look at it, and that they are actually quite similar in terms of the facial expressions that people were looking at. So it's narrowed it down to 4 basic emotions that everybody has. One of the biggest things I like to make sure I address with parents when they come in with their young people, and this one's for dads, is that all of these feelings are actually normal and natural to have. So the number of people that are brought into my office and said, or the number of young people, they're really angry, we need to stop it. And I'm like, well, it's actually a normal feeling. There's actually probably something justified behind why your young ladies are feeling angry. We just have to help them learn better ways to actually manage that anger or manage the triggers that are there for them. The same with worry and fear. It's a normal feeling. It's something that we all experience. And for the dads that are here and grandfathers, it's something you probably experience on a frequent basis yourself. So it's not necessarily something that needs to be fixed. And this is for the young people to realise as well. It's actually okay to sometimes be scared of things or to be worried or angry about them. We just have to learn better ways of managing them, because it's when we let them go that it starts to create more difficulties in our day-to-day life. All right, so some of you might have seen something similar to this before, but it's helping us to recognise that what we actually feel and what we think are 2 completely separate things. And if we can start to recognise that, we start to feel like we have a little bit more control over trying to change either what we're thinking or what we're feeling. Because both of those things usually will influence what we actually do or our behaviours. So to give you an example, this might be the young girl's response that's there that I quite often hear. So they never let me do anything. It's not fair. They just try to control me. Hands up, dads who have heard that one. Yeah. All right, so the resulting emotion that usually comes from a young person in that respect is anger, which if they've been told no for doing something they want to do or all of their friends are doing, it's probably a fairly justified feeling that's there. But what's maybe not justified is the yelling at mum or dad, slamming doors, or just defying all directions given for the rest of that day, which tend to usually be the response that's there. And that's one for the girls to have a think about whether that's something you've maybe done maybe in the past week. All right, next, so another example to look at it from another angle for you. I know nothing, I don't remember learning about that, I'm going to fail. So I'm not sure, are we nearly up to exam period or are we? But that's a pretty common one that I get from a lot of young people as well, is that as it gets closer to assignments being due or exams being completed, that the mind starts to tick over in regards to, I haven't learnt this, I'm going to fail, I'm not going to be able to do this. And as you get into older years, I tend to see that jump to, I'm not going to get into the course I want to get into, I'm not going to get to do the job I want to do, I'm going to be homeless, is where I've had some of them go to. So usually the resulting emotion that comes from that is feeling quite anxious and stressed, which means we can often result in quite strong panic, freeze response that can happen for a lot of young people, or starting to feel sick or feeling like you're needing to use the bathroom a lot more in that respect. So the reason why it's kind of important to know what's actually happening is because in those moments, particularly if it is for assignments and exams, if you go in a panicked response, you're working at about half capacity of what your brain should actually be able to do when you're trying to actually pull that information you need to pass those exams that are in front of you. So, just so it's not too scientific, I'll give you the names of the parts of the brain, but you don't actually have to remember them. It's just so you've got an awareness of what happens. But all of us, males and females, have an emotional region in our brain that's called our limbic system. And it's the part of our brain that responds to emotion or responds with the signals about how we should respond emotionally to a situation. Research does say that it is typically a little bit larger developed in females than it is in males in terms of our limbic system. So often we do tend to then see sometimes a little bit more emotion that does happen, or more of a stronger emotional response in instances from females than we do in males. But dads, you do have a limbic system, so we do have emotional responses that do happen that's there. So when this emotional system is triggered, there's a part in our brain that's called your amygdala, and it sends out to our body a signal that something's about to happen that we're either quite fearful of or feels really overwhelming to deal with. When that sends a signal to your body, and I want you girls to have a think about whether you've experienced this, when you may walk into a situation and you don't feel safe or overwhelmed, and initially a response that usually happens is heart beating faster. Hands up from the girls, have you noticed this happening before, where you've walked into something or you've gone into an exam and your heart feels like it's racing? Yeah, that's courtesy of a lovely chemical called adrenaline. So your body thinks it needs lots of extra energy because you're feeling overwhelmed or fearful of something you're about to do. Adrenaline makes your heart beat faster, which means you need to breathe heavier or faster to try and get in more oxygen because you've got extra blood pumping around your body. But probably one of the most important things is the front part of our brain, which is where we do all of our decision-making, problem-solving, logical thinking, our rational thinking. We actually have blood drain from that part of your brain to the rest of your body to sustain that physical response to stress. If you go into an exam and you are highly stressed and your blood's left that part of your brain to go somewhere else, how well do you think you're going to do at being able to actually think calmly in your exam? That doesn't work properly. It interferes with the part of your brain called the hippocampus, and that's where we store and retrieve memory. What do you need in an exam? Need memory. So we're trying to work on helping you recognise ways that your body's actually reacting to stress or reacting to a strong emotion that's there, so that we can actually better understand why we need to do something to calm ourselves down. So recognising the early signs your body gives you that you're starting to experience this strong emotional response to something is a really important thing to do. And for dads, there are certain things here, particularly behavioural or physical, that you may actually be able to increase your awareness of. So it might actually give you a little bit of a sign that something's not quite right, that there's a difficulty coping in this respect. So physical, it may be complaints of increased headaches, stomach aches, ulcers that can happen, weight loss, weight gain, twitches that you might see in certain parts of body, usually around eyes is a common one, loss of appetite, nausea, overeating, or just changes in sleeping patterns that are there. And behaviourally, it might be noticing there's a lot of nail biting, grinding teeth. So if there's lots of complaints about soreness in the side of the jaw, often that can be clenching or grinding that can be from stress. Late for things, so just not organised, forgetting things in different places, not as much care and appearance being taken, or slamming doors, those heightened responses. And for some young people, it may look like anger, but it may actually be more an overwhelmed, stressed or anxious feeling that's going on. So sometimes if we just jump to stop being angry, get over it, it actually isn't working with what's going on for a young person. So sometimes it might actually be asking a question as to what's going on. The biggest advice I'd probably give dads is when you're asking those questions, and this is for mums or dads, try and remove the word why in asking that question. When you ask the question why, automatically you are putting someone in a position where they have to justify themselves. Think about if you get pulled up by someone and they start asking you why. Why did you do that? You automatically go into defense mode and you automatically start to feel like you have to justify. And young people are pretty good at justifying their reasons why they do things. So you'll get all the reasons, but you might not actually get to the point of hearing what's actually going on for the young person. It's a challenge. I test all these things out on my partner at home. So give it a go. It will take practice because you'll sit down and go to ask a question and you'll go to start with why, but try and reframe it for yourself and see if you actually get more out of that conversation than if you had have asked that in that way to start with. For the girls themselves, emotionally, some clues for you may be that you're noticing your mood feels like it's changing all of the time and you're getting quite irritable and you've just yelled at someone and you don't actually know why you've yelled at them. The feelings of helplessness, restlessness, and any sort of agitation or aggression that's there, but there's a whole range of different things that's there that's really important to start to be aware of, because if you can respond sooner, as soon as you notice these things, it's usually much easier to calm yourself down than when you let it get to full-blown panic stage that happens. But the good thing is we actually can do something about it if you do start to notice these emotions that's there. So I'm sure somewhere along the lines there's been people that have said to you when you start to feel panic, just take a breath and calm down. And sometimes I get a lot of people that come in and say, if another person tells me to take a deep breath, I'm going to scream because they're sick of people telling them that. But just to go back in terms of when we were talking about getting to know your brain, the response that happens in that respect is what we call a fight, flight, freeze response, when we have a really strong emotional reaction and our initial response is just to get out of somewhere as quick as possible, to try and fight off whatever you feel is a threat. But a quite common response we get is that freeze that we see in young people where it's almost like they can't speak, move, they just don't know what action to take next. When we actually take deep breaths, it enacts the complete opposite response in our body, which is what we call the parasympathetic nervous system. It slows our heart rate down. It helps our body to actually start to unwind in contrast to that fight-flight response. So that's what we call the rest and digest. It actually lowers the activity that's happening in your body so you actually can slow down. So there is a reason why people tell you to take a deep breath. But usually we need more than one. I teach young people that if we can try and coordinate deep breath in through your nose, slowly out through your mouth, but what we want to do is we want to count to 5 as you're doing each one, so it actually helps to slow down your breathing rate that's there. So slowly in through your nose, count to 5, hold, count to 5, and then slowly out through your mouth. If you need a prompt to remind you, I teach littler kids to imagine they're smelling their favourite flower and blowing out birthday candles. If you need a prompt to help remind you for that side of things. Visualisation. So this is a little bit more than just close your eyes and go to your happy place. This is more working on trying to help you visualise somewhere that for you is a calming and relaxing place to be. And in that respect, if we usually can work with trying to bring in our 5 different senses to that process, it actually helps you immerse yourself in that environment a little bit more. That helps to have a stronger effect. Our brain can't actually distinguish between fact or fiction. So if we can actually strongly visualise a calming space for ourselves, and this is a really good one for dads as well, if you are, whether it's work or family-wise, quite overwhelmed with things, this actually can have quite a significant response on helping to calm your system down, because you actually give yourself a break from whatever that stressful environment is that's happening around you. There's some really cool studies that have been done looking at this. Harvard University ran a piano study where they got people to sit in front of a piano and to play a certain chord on the piano, and they actually looked at what was happening in their brain activity. They then took the keyboard away and got them to airplay the same chords as if they actually still had the piano in front of them, and found that their brains still showed the same activity as if they were actually playing it. And the last step was they got them to not use their hands at all, just close their eyes and visualise themselves playing the keyboard, and the same response happened in their brain as if they were physically playing it. So for any girls who play musical instruments, if you go away on holidays and don't take it with you, you can actually still practice. Your brain remembers that. For dads that might have a bit more of an interest in the sports side of things, they also did a study with this looking at a basketball team and the accuracy of three-point shots that they were taking. So they got one team to actually go out on the court and physically take the three-point shots and measure their accuracy. For the other team, they got them to stay in the change room and to close their eyes and actually visualise themselves taking the three-point shots. And in case you haven't guessed it, the visualisation group actually had a higher accuracy of three-point shots than the team that physically did it. So if you jump on, there's some really cool studies that they've actually done to try and look at this, but it just highlights the strength of actually having that as a coping skill, because you don't need to have anything with you, and it's something you can do in any environment. So it's probably one of the strongest ones with young people. I try to help them develop the skills around, because it is something that has such a profound effect on helping to decrease how strong those emotions are. So like I said, use your 5 senses. So try and identify if you were at this place that feels calming for you. What would you be able to see, hear, smell, taste? Is there anything that you'd be able to touch that was happening around you? Or what would it feel like to be at that place? So mindfulness, so this comes back to that our brain can't distinguish between fact and fiction. Thoughts are not fact. Just because we think something doesn't automatically mean that it's true. Does anyone want to have a guess how many thoughts we have per day? Most research indicates it's between 50 to 60,000 thoughts we have per day. So, if you think about, do you think it's possible to listen to that many thoughts in a day? So what tends to happen is our mind tends to actually listen to the thoughts that we think is the most important at that time. So if we're triggered by a very strong emotion, our brain is going to, by default, listen or focus on the negative thoughts that are there, because it's reinforcing the emotion that's happening at that particular time. They've actually found research to suggest that if we're not actively doing something to change our thoughts, 90% of the thoughts we had yesterday will be the same we have today. So if you're in a pretty negative headspace, it just continues day in, day out in that respect. And that's where the skill of developing mindfulness comes in quite handy. Similar to the visualization effect, that it's helping you identify what you want to focus on or have that control over, where you let your mind go. So it stops it from, I didn't do as well on that test, burrowing all the way down to I'm going to be homeless and never have a job. It's being able to stop it up here and actually have some control over where you let your mind think in that respect. There's a couple of apps on there that I've listed down that are quite beneficial to have a look at. The Smiling Mind app in particular, if you guys haven't come across it, it has a specific section for young people where they have developed the mindfulness. It's like a prompted mindfulness script that speaks to you through the app, and it's developed particularly for young people. If you jump on the App Store, there's a whole range of different ones. I just find that with the Headspace one and the Smiling Mind, the Headspace one has a really good research base behind it, but the Smiling Mind has been developed for young people. So there's some really good things on it to have a look at. You can do it yourself, and that's that similar process as your visualisation of stop and give yourself something to focus on. When someone explained mindfulness to me when I was in high school, my vision that came to mind was sitting with your legs crossed, humming and not thinking about anything for that period of time. It's not how we do it. The idea is that you are going to still have thoughts. You have 60,000 of them per day. They are going to still happen when you are learning the skill or practicing it. but it's more about being able to get to the point of, in that time period you're doing it, being able to be aware that you're thinking and bring your focus back to something else that you choose in that respect. Dads, if you haven't got onto this, it's something that's really, really, really useful to have a look at in your day-to-day functioning as well, because it has a really big effect on helping to feel like you're in control of what you're thinking about, which, when we're in that respect, productivity usually is a little bit higher because we're not getting caught up in all the negative worry. All right, the next step of it is those ones are all really good for the emotional regulation side, but in respect of the resiliency side, there's some really important things we can be doing day to day just to help keep our baseline nice and regulated for yourself so that you're working from a really good foundation. First one, I'm sure you've all heard it numerous times, but exercise. And this is for dads and daughters, so it's something that is there that's really important across the board. So exercise has an effect on increasing serotonin and dopamine, and just to give you a, foundation from those chemicals in our brain, serotonin is the chemical that most antidepressant medications work on. So if we can do something that's helping to boost that naturally, it's obviously preferential. So serotonin we get from sunlight, so actually being outside in the sun. So encouraging your daughters during exam periods to get outside and spend some time in the sun, or just in some daylight to start with, is a really good suggestion because it helps to boost that for themselves. Exercise obviously helps to relieve the body of extra energy, which sometimes, if you think about the body clues or the physical clues we spoke about for stress, getting that heightened energy level in our body can mirror that quite significantly. So doing something to get some of that energy out of our body is a really, really good idea, particularly in higher periods of stress. Diet. So obviously our body needs fuel regularly, and it's good to see that having breakfast is a good start, because skipping meals, they have actually found some research that it slows down metabolism. And breakfast being the most important meal of the day because it keeps your brain active, it gives your body something to run on for the morning so that you actually can sit, function, concentrate, but also regulate mood. If we don't eat for long periods of time, then what we can find is blood sugar levels drop and we can get quite irritable, moody, memory functions not working too well. So that's a really important one, just to try and ensure that we are sustaining a regular, healthy diet. Sleep. Who goes to bed with their phones or iPads or laptops or whatever the devices are that happens? I saw more hands from dads then. So this is for both girls and fathers to have a think about. And some of you may actually be aware of it because it is becoming more general knowledge, which is great. But all of your devices use a blue-based light to light the back of the screen. What do you think that does to your brain at night time when you're staring at it constantly? Blue light in your face. Yep. You can't sleep because you've got blue light in your face. What can happen for people, particularly if they're sensitive to it, is it tricks your brain into thinking it's daytime because all it's seeing is blue that's happening in front of it. We produce a chemical at night time called melatonin, and if we are staring too much at screens, for some people that are sensitive to it, it actually can prevent our body releasing melatonin when we actually need it to help induce that sleepy, tired feeling. So if you're getting off devices at 10, 11 o'clock, for people that are sensitive, it may be midnight, 1 o'clock before you're actually in a place where you're feeling tired. It is a pretty, for some young people, there is a process, and this is for dads to be aware of. There is a process that can happen for some young people just by natural default. Our brains rewire in adolescence, so the need for extra sleep, the extra food that often happens, and the increased exhaustion can often be from our brain doing this rewiring process for adulthood that happens in adolescence. But sometimes it can mean that it does impact sleep, where we see night owls start to come out and they're awake until midnight and want to sleep until 10 o'clock the next morning. So it's just monitoring it for yourself and being aware of that side of things, just to make sure it's not going too far, because kids have to get up to go to school the next morning. So just monitoring it and having a chat to support people around you if it is something you're noticing is becoming an issue, where sleeping's not happening to early hours of the morning. So when you're getting up early for school, you're not getting enough sleep. The biggest suggestion in sleep I often make to parents is on the weekends, if you don't have anything on, let young people sleep until they wake up. Particularly if they're not falling asleep until later during the week, they may actually be needing to have that extra sleep on the weekend because their system's quite exhausted. So if you don't have anything that they actually have to be up for, it's worth letting young people sleep so that they can actually help their body to restore what it needs to. I can see a lot of young people going, yeah, Dad. And relationships is probably a big one, which is great to see so many young people here with their dads or grandfathers today, because having good support networks around you makes a significant difference. For dads, try and avoid let's sit down opposite each other and have a talk about everything that's going on in your life, because you're going to get nothing from them. In fact, one of the biggest things I've found working with young people, and that's with quite young kids through to adolescence, is when you have someone sitting opposite you and the only expectation is to talk, it makes it feel very uncomfortable for young people. So busy hands usually means that you will get more information that starts to come out. Otherwise, it's in terms of going for a walk, so that side-by-side process can often make that easier to communicate. The other part of it as well is some of you dads might notice driving in the car seems to be a pretty big time when stuff just comes out. It's like, oh, okay, right, we're nearly at school, we need to talk about this. So driving in the car, going for a walk, things where you're actually doing something together but the avenue there is to communicate with each other is a really strong suggestion, rather than just expecting a young person to be able to sit opposite you and talk. We are all social animals and we have an important need for connection with others. So building really good social networks around you from your peers is a really important thing for young ladies. And if it's something you're struggling with or you're having difficulties in that respect, it's really important that you are talking to people about that. So whether that is with a parent, grandparent, school counsellor that you might have, teachers that are there, or with someone that you might see for support in that area, it is really important to discuss those things, because often from a social perspective, when we bottle all of that up inside, we don't have an outlet, and that can start to feel like it just gets a bigger and bigger and bigger issue before something can actually be done to support you. So it's definitely worth talking to people if there is difficulties that are happening in that area. All right, does anyone here practice gratitude regularly? Excellent. All right, so it seems like a very, very simple idea, but being a psychologist, having a research background, I like to give you the research behind why we actually do certain things. So there was a study that was done over in America, and they used participants from 8 years of age right up until 80 years of age. There was 1,000 people in general, and they split them into 2 groups. And what they did was, one group, they got them to do measures looking at anxiety, stress, depression, but also got them to report social engagement, how much they enjoyed being around other people, as well as measured their immune response in their body. So the control group, they sent off and said, right, just do what you normally do for 21 days. The other group, they gave them one instruction, and that was to write down at least one thing per day they were grateful for. Nothing else was to change. That was the only thing that they were supposed to do differently, and then brought them all back and did a follow-up assessment with them. As you would expect, the control group didn't have much change. They stayed the same over that 21-day period. But for the actual group that had to do the once-a-day gratitude, what they actually found was that their immune system showed improvements. So when they tested their immune response, there was an improvement in terms of how strong that was in their body. There was less reports of aches and pains that was happening. They measured blood pressure and found it was lower. They reported increasing exercise that was happening and taking better care of themselves and improvements in sleep. This was only after 21 days. They also had higher levels of positive emotions, so less reports of anxiety, stress and depression symptoms compared to the start of the 21 days. They were more alert and alive, more joy and pleasure was reported, and they were more optimistic and happy. And socially, they actually wanted to be around people more. They got more enjoyment from being around other people. So who's going to start doing gratitude now? Yeah. So it's a pretty simple one to do. It's something where it's in terms of with it reducing the frequency and episodes of the depressive symptoms that's there. And they put it down to the process, as if you remember, I mentioned before that if we're not actively doing something to change our negative thoughts, 90% of what we thought yesterday will be the same today. What they're finding is that it's really, really hard to be resentful and grateful at the same time. So you're actively doing something to change that thought process. If you come into my clinic, I have a giant glass jar on the reception desk and there's a sign up that says, "What are you grateful for?" And I encourage all young people when they come in to, at least in that moment when they come in for an hour every couple of weeks, to write something down and add it to that jar. And it's a good one to do at home, because if you then have a period of time with the girls and they come home and everything's terrible, I'm going to fail everything, I've got no friends, I'm not good enough for anything, all of these thoughts come out. You have a ready-made resource to go, well, actually go pull something out of your jar because you've been building that, and that's all good things that are actually happening. So if you can find a way to start that within the household, it's a really positive one to do for both adults and for young people. So it's a statement that you can do. It's going through what went well or what am I grateful for each day as a reflection, so that you can actually go, well, I've told myself all the negative things, but if I actually focused on what was positive, is there anything I can come up with? So trying to recognise achievements that's there. So having specific goals, and I strongly encourage you to break them down into smaller goals, because if we only have a big goal and we only celebrate when we actually meet that one, we're losing the opportunity to actually boost some really positive chemicals in our brain by achieving those goals along the way. Dopamine's the main chemical in our brain that's boosted by meeting goals that's there, and it helps keep us driven towards working towards that bigger goal when we have small achievements that take place. Biggest thing is make sure you celebrate in some way the achievements that you make. So it's not kind of going, oh great, I actually did really well on that assignment, let's just get on with the next one. It's important that you actually take some time to recognise that. The only thing I flag is try to avoid, and this is often by default we do it, but for dads, try and avoid food as being the reward for doing something good, because that doesn't set up really good patterns for adulthood in terms of, great, I got a job promotion, I'll go treat myself with chocolate. Try and find other things. It might be going somewhere that's really special to you. It might be having an extra afternoon where you may catch up with some friends, but try and find some alternatives that are there, as opposed to it always being going out for dinner or food that's a reward in that respect. By having achievements and meeting them, we find that it helps to build self-esteem, creates a sense of accomplishment that's there, and increased self-belief that comes from that as well. And like we spoke about, try setting those small goals to start with. I like to finish with this one in terms of just helping to cement some of that from good old Dr. Seuss, who was fantastic in words that came out. So you've got brains in your head and feet in your shoes, and you can steer yourself in any direction you choose. The last part's the most important, because you actually do get to choose what direction. It's just making sure you actually are listening to the things that you're wanting, not just the things that you're trying to avoid, because you're still thinking about those things, and that's where we sometimes get stuck, that we spend too much time thinking on the things we don't want, and that's what we end up attracting, as opposed to thinking about where we want to go and what we want to achieve. All right. Thank you. Any questions? Let me know.
Does anyone have any questions for Rebecca? Ooh, all right. Well, for one, I'm very grateful for you coming, Rebecca, taking an early morning start to be with us, and I'm grateful for everyone showing up. And we have a lovely little gift for you. Charlotte's going to give you. So, once again, thank you very much, Rebecca. All right. Now to wrap up the morning, we have a couple of things. On every table are some of the flyers for the next Fathers Club meeting, which is a wine tasting night. That is a family of the school. So we're going to start with one region, and I encourage everyone to come along to that. If you have a red dot on your flyer, please see Simone on the way out, because you've won a prize of a biscuit for the dad and daughter. And on the back side of the flyer will be another outstanding event that's coming up, which is the Foundation Race Day at the Gold Coast, Aqueous Park for the naming sponsors. And again, we have a lot of family members involved in the racing industry, so enjoy, everybody. Thank you very much, Julie, the senior leadership team, Pierre, and Miss Simone Crowther, and the catering staff. Thanks.